Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you for joining us for another one of our monthly webinars. We are starting slightly early, as you can see, for this webinar. Inshallah, we should get started soon. So just going to start with a brief presentation of what we've been doing this month. So hopefully you can see that. Okay. So the discussion today, we're very lucky to have our guest today. And a part of what we'll be discussing is about OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. And when we look into, if you like, an understanding or an Islamic understanding for this, and a lot has been talked about OCD, is waswasa. So that's what I want to briefly touch upon before we dive in, inshallah. So just a few, as customary, we start with verses from the Quran. I've chosen two verses here in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about the waswasa. So for example, the first one starts with فَوَسْوَسَ لَهُمَ الشَّيْطَانُ. So Satan did the waswasa, or Satan whispered to them. And this is in the context of Prophet Adam and Eve, or Hawa, as we would call, to reveal them of what had been covered from their private parts. And he said, your Lord has only forbidden you this tree lest you become angels or become of the immortals. So if you like, the inclination which draws them towards the tree is called waswasa, or a repressive thought, as we would kind of see it. And then another ayah in chapter 50 where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَ وَنَعْلَمُ مَا تَوَسْوَسُ بِهِ نَفْسُهُ. And surely we created man, and we know what his self whispers, or what the waswasa of his self whispers to him. وَنَحْنُ أَقْرَبُ إِلَيْهِ مِنْ حَبْلِ الْوَرِيدِ. And we are closer to, or we are nearer to him than his jugular vein. So this is an understanding, inshallah, the concept of waswasa, the concept of intrusive thoughts, the concept of doubts, continually doubting or having obsessive thoughts about something. So inshallah, we'd start with that introduction. In terms of people who may be new to this webinar, new to Strong Support. So Strong Support is a peer support organization for Muslims who struggle with sexual identity or even gender identity issues. We have a free 30-minute consultation, which hundreds of you have taken use of. We also have clients that we take on for one-to-one, and we had support circles on Thursdays for men and on Sundays for women. Also on Sundays, we have a circle dedicated for people from the Arab community. And also on Sunday evening, we have a parent circle for parents with children who have issues around sexuality or gender. We've had interest for increasing the scope to other circles in terms of spouses, or for example, people in the US, which we're not currently covering because of the time difference. But if this is something which does interest, then you can go to our contact form, strongsupport.co.uk/contact, and you can see a form if a circle isn't really accessible for you in your time zone. We recently wrote to the government, and this, alhamdulillah, this was a combination of effort from, for example, SRE Islamic, the Bridges Foundation, in that we got together and we wrote to the government to say, in looking at equalities, to respect different equalities of different groups and to include people of faith when this ban on conversion therapy comes in. Now, the ban itself has had a lot of opposition in the UK. You might have seen last month the equalities body regulator, or the watchdog of the government, the EHRC, issued a statement on some of the considerations the government should take, in that it respects different equalities and continues to protect the Equality Act, which has the protected characteristics. So it's good. And obviously we've also seen 2,500 Christian ministers who've went to Westminster, and they have voiced their concerns about equal treatment to both the LGBT and the faith population. So I think we're at a good point, at least in the UK, where it seems like we have rallied and we have got the message across to them. And inshallah, when we do get an update from the government, we will update to you as usual. Now, in terms of the webinar today, we have Michael. Michael's from the Breakthrough Clinic. So you can head over to their website and you can see the different types of support which is available, especially in terms of addiction treatments. And this is not just sexual addiction, it can be other forms of addiction as well, which is covered. We're so grateful to have Michael. And actually, I got to see Michael in the last IFTCC conference, which was really nice. Michael has recently become licensed, is that the right term, as a clinical counselor, which takes, I don't know, 5,000 hours. It was something ridiculous like that, especially for us in Britain, where you get accreditation after 450 hours of counseling practice. Is definitely a different level. So he practices, as we said, in California, Breakthrough Clinic, under the supervision of Dr. Joseph Nicolosi Jr. Michael also is in the board of directors for the Alliance. We had Caroline Pila last month, who also served as past president. The Alliance is, if you like, equivalent to the IFTCC in America, in being a professional organization for therapists who help this client population. Also, I think what makes this special, at least for me, is in my own work, that I struggled with the same-sex attraction, and I found there wasn't any support which was available. And then so I said, okay, let's get on the other side and start helping and go down the route. And this kind of shows you that you wouldn't really find someone who is experiencing that struggle that becomes the therapist for that. But I think it highlights to you the scarcity of resource which is available for this. So you can see Michael's story in the freetolovemovie.com, where he goes deeper into his own work, which is kind of appreciated in terms of the fact that he understands what it's like, or can have, or what we would call empathy, have a certain level of empathy towards the clients as he's gone through the issue himself. And that's why I think it makes his work ever more meaningful from that angle. So in terms of how today is going to go, we'll have, as normal, Michael will speak, and then we'll have the Q&A. Now, I know a number of you are already writing in the Q&A, so we've got a section below where you can, so if you're on the Zoom webinar, you'll see at the bottom there's Q&A, and you can write anonymously. You can also, when we start questions, you can raise your hand if you want to ask a question live through audio. But be aware, if you do choose that option, your name will be shown, and this is a publicly live webinar. So just be aware, if you do want to keep your anonymity, then you can do so using the option in the Q&A to be anonymous. So without further ado, I hand over to Michael.
Ali, thank you. So is the video already streaming of me as well right now?
Yes.
Okay, good. I see we have people on here from probably different parts of the world also. It says we're live on Facebook, is that right?
That's right. We're live on the Facebook channel as well.
Right. I chuckle because, as you know, Facebook has not been the most friendly towards organizations like this.
Absolutely. We somehow escaped the craziness which I think went on. So, but I hear some of those groups are back, or Facebook has put some of those groups back.
Yeah. It seems very selective based on who complains about who. So just to highlight something you said before I go into my presentation, the freetolovemovie.com, I think, is where you can find it. But the Breakthrough Clinic is one resource for where I work, because that is the clinic where I work. But you can also visit Reintegrative Therapy Association, and that link we can provide later. But Reintegrative Therapy is the official school of therapy that Dr. Nicolosi, my current employer, utilizes, and it is the type of therapy, one type of therapy that I'm trained in. I'm not exclusively presenting on reintegrative therapy today. So I just want to be clear that that is one type of therapy that is especially well known for treating same-sex attraction and therapy. And it's one that I'm trained in and an expert in that area, but it's not the only thing. And people from the IFTCC who have presented here have shown, I'm sure, different ways of approaching these issues like same-sex attraction and therapy. So without saying much more, I'm going to share my screen, and then I'll let you guys know what I'm going to present about. I'm going to try to keep my presentation to about 30 minutes so that, given their timeline now, we have at least 40 minutes or so for question and answer, because I think that will probably be the most fruitful part of our time together, so that people who have questions can enter a dialogue with me and I with them. So I'm going to share my screen. Just give me one moment, because I want to make sure to do this properly. Advance portion of screen. Okay, just give me one moment. Okay, is it sharing already or no?
It is seeing, but it's slightly cut off.
Okay, just the
Oh,
down.
I think that's
Hang on
fine.
one.
Oh, that's better. That's brilliant.
Yeah, hang on just a sec. Okay, how is it now? Is it, you're seeing the whole slide?
We're seeing the whole slide now, yeah.
Perfect. So this is a similar presentation that I gave at the IFTCC, but I've adjusted it some for our purposes, combined a little bit of two different presentations. And also it's going to be directed, I believe, Ali, I want to check in with you one more time before I start. Most of the people on this call are not clinicians, right? Most people here are individuals seeking help for themselves.
That's correct, yes.
So some of what I'm going to give you guys today is an overview of an academic presentation, but I'm going to spend less time focusing on the academic resources and more time emphasizing how it might impact you and for your own personal interest in education as somebody seeking treatment. So as you know, my name is Michael Gasparro. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist and a licensed professional clinical counselor. I, out of the state of California, work at the Breakthrough Clinic, and I was inspired about this topic, about specifically emotional integration, which we'll unpack in a minute, and obsessive compulsive disorder as it relates to same-sex attraction because of the clinical need I observed, but also because I personally notice the importance of addressing obsessive compulsive disorder in my own life, in my own healing process, and trying to integrate that into how I viewed my journey of handling my experience of same-sex attraction. As Ali mentioned, I've publicly discussed that I'm somebody who has been on this journey of experiencing same-sex attraction, and it does help in the way I approach therapy because I do utilize that experience to help empathize, but also to help myself remain humble. And I say that not that I'm not an expert, but that there's often in research more questions than answers that we find. So I present to you the research portion of this with humility, knowing that we're doing the best to understand a variety of factors that contribute to same-sex attraction and a variety of ways of addressing it in therapy. In addition to therapy, I think therapeutic interventions are fantastic, but also, as you all know, counseling from your local religious leaders, lay support groups, peer-led support groups, and others all can play a big part, and we'll discuss that more later, in helping people address their goals. Therapy, one definition I really like is professionally guided self-change, meaning that if you're going to therapy, you're seeking to make changes for yourself, and you're seeking a guide who may have a significant impact, but the therapist does not have a magic wand, and they're not actually changing you. You're changing things in your life in conjunction with a healing relationship and a guide that will hopefully act as a mentor in some ways, and perhaps even be a catalyst for change, but not actually more than you do for yourself. And it's really important with men who experience same-sex attraction to identify themselves as that primary catalyst for change in their life, or if you will, first their relationship with their religion, and then themselves as cooperating with that. Because many men with same-sex attraction feel helpless and often feel hopeless. And so to counteract both of those tendencies, I'm going to emphasize today the need for the individual with SSA to see themselves as the primary instigator of change in their own life. Okay, so a couple of reasons why I think it's important for you, if you're watching this, to consider these ideas, even if you're not a therapist, about emotional integration, same-sex attraction, and OCD. If you come to therapy for same-sex attraction that is unwanted, and you are a sincerely religious adult male, there is a much higher chance you also have diagnosable levels of OCD than if you were just somebody in the general population who is not religious and did not have same-sex attraction. We know this because men with same-sex sexual behavior and feelings are documented to have significantly higher levels of OCD than in the general population. If you have same-sex attraction and co-occurring OCD, it also may indicate specific indications for treatment, meaning the type of therapy you want to pursue, and meaning the type of support you want to get from family and friends or your religious communities. Third, this might help you in our presentation because it's possible that you can have SSA, OCD, but also have other diagnosable mental health issues. So in other words, this might help you understand a little bit better about if OCD isn't your struggle, you might want to consider getting evaluated for other potential issues like ADHD or autism spectrum disorder. And last, any attempt to address mental health issues like SSA and OCD, in my view, should be grounded in what I, as a person, call a proper anthropological view of a human being, a proper view of authentic human flourishing, and a moral, spiritual, and biological reality. Now, while this differs from religion to religion, and it is probably clear that I am not Muslim, I am a Catholic man, much is found in common through natural law and through shared religious tradition among the great religions of the world, especially the religions that share biblical texts, but also through people of goodwill who use their intellect and natural reason to understand what it means to be human and what are moral and spiritual laws that govern human communities. It is important to keep these in mind because if you have psychology that does not properly understand human persons and human flourishing, it can become a dangerous field that seeks primarily to promote an ideology of its own implicit bias and not a truth-centered, human flourishing, supporting field. So I know that's a lot to consider, but it's really important that you keep in mind your religious values are important. I know you know that, but when you seek therapy, it's important that your therapist respects that, even if they're not of the same religious background. And I work with a lot of Muslim men, and we don't share the exact same religious tradition, but my role as a therapist is to best understand their perspective and support them in their sincerely held religious values. At the end of this presentation, you should know a little bit more about OCD, about same-sex attraction, and about things that can be co-occurring between the two and affect each other. I'm going to tell you a quick story before I move to the next slide about how this might apply to treatment. Traditionally, OCD is often treated using cognitive behavioral therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy, however, is not a perfect solution. And many people who come to therapy with same-sex attraction and OCD find cognitive behavioral therapy to be an imperfect method. And attachment issues, meaning somebody who feels less than secure in their primary attachment relationships in childhood, can cause both insecurities in relationship, but also susceptibility to developing OCD. And if somebody has insecure attachment and then subsequent same-sex attraction and OCD, treatments that focus on attachment security as well as emotional integration when combined with cognitive behavioral therapy may provide added benefit that cognitive behavioral therapy alone may not provide. So with that in mind, let's look at the next slide.
So
there are a lot, oh, go ahead. Sorry, Ali.
I can now see the slides turning out. I thought it was just me, sorry.
Did it shift?
Yeah, no, I can see SSA possible factors of etiology now. That's fine.
So we're going to just review briefly that there are a lot of possible factors contributing to the etiology or development of same-sex attraction. There could be some genetic predisposition, although the amount of this is arguable, including the validity of predisposition at all. I know some theorists ascribe up to a third of etiology being related to genetic predisposition, but many others argue that that is an inflated number for various reasons. Family dynamics and parental style, attachment style, emotional maturation and developmental issues, other psychological disorders such as autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, OCD, mental and behavioral addictions and habits, peer relationships especially, or sibling relationships, same-sex sibling relationships especially, spiritual issues, trauma, including sexual molestation, abuse, innate personality traits, exposure to pornography or other corrupting influences at an adolescent age or at an early age, and additional factors. All of these have been identified by various organizations and individuals as possible factors contributing to why somebody develops the experience of same-sex attraction. So keep that in mind, that we're exploring a small portion of a bigger picture. I've shifted the slides again. Did it shift properly? Okay, so other factors that relate to OCD development. There is a genetic predisposition to people developing OCD. Family dynamics and environment have a big impact on the development of OCD as well. Attachment style, emotional maturation. Notice you're seeing a lot of overlap between the two slides. Temperament, individual temperament, meaning someone's personality, spiritual issues, religious environment. So it's beyond the scope of the presentation we're doing today to look at all of the possible factors of OCD development and same-sex attraction. But I highlight these because I think it's important to notice that there are a lot of things, which means each person's path is going to be unique. And there's not a one-size-fits-all way of exploring and explaining the presence of same-sex attraction and co-occurring OCD. It doesn't mean that there is no explanation. So there especially is a lot to consider in the realm of OCD and SSA. This is a brief follow-up on what I mentioned about human flourishing. Sincerely held religious individuals, religious or sincerely held religious beliefs, I should say, often form their identity primarily on their relationship to their creator and to their religion. And an expert on human flourishing and happiness from Loyola Marymount University named Dr. Christopher Kaiser, who's a friend of mine, has made the argument in personal conversations with me that human flourishing depends on the most stable self-identity possible. And nothing that is temporal, meaning that is transitory or of this earth, is as stable as something eternal and unchanging. And the only thing in most religious traditions, including in Islam and Christianity, that is eternal and unchanging is the creator. That's it. Everything else is changing. And this is important with relating to OCD, because the gay construct itself, meaning the feelings I have define me, are my identity, reinforces the need to seek certainty about one's identity through sexuality, and can even therefore add to somebody's susceptibility to obsessive compulsive disorder. Whereas somebody who trusts that their identity is predominantly structured and rooted in their relationship to their creator, to God, has a better chance at a stable identity that is less susceptible to obsessive compulsive fluctuation. Let's talk briefly about this slide. Experimental and philosophical psychology support each other in their search for truth. So what I'm mentioning here about human flourishing is a philosophical model, but experimental psychology works together with philosophy to try to better understand the human person. Modern psychology has inherent moral bias that it denies. In other words, it says human sexuality is based on a variety of factors, and then most things like the American Psychological Association that are rooted in secular humanism will say, and therefore any experience of sexuality is fine as long as the person enjoys it, and therefore homosexuality is normal. That is a moral claim. That is not an experimental claim. So they claim to be experimental psychologists, but they make moral philosophical claims. So what we want is ideally a synthesis of a moral philosophical view with experimental psychology, and the moral view should be based in natural law, which can be achieved through human reason, which is why people from different religions can come to some of the same conclusions about morality, and revealed divine truth. And much like I mentioned earlier, of religion has overlap in the major religions of the world, the Abrahamic religions, and what they view as revealed divine truth. Especially, you may easily point to the 10 Commandments as an example. So any experimental psychology looking at the origins of same-sex attraction or the treatment of same-sex attraction and OCD that denies basic moral truth as found through natural law and the revealed law of like the 10 Commandments, for instance, is inherently problematic and will undermine our attempt to lead our lives in the most happy, most divinely inspired way possible. So going on from there, religion often helps as foundation, theology and philosophy, theology meaning the study of religion, philosophy, the study of ideas, to support each other in an accurate view of human flourishing. I'm going to skip this slide because we've already kind of covered this, but reason, rational, and faith-informed view of human person will help us in our approach to therapy. So emotional integration, some of this is related to a moral claim. I have worked with many Muslim men, and most of my time working with Muslim men, these principles have not presented a conflict with their own view of their faith. If you, as you hear me say this, find there to be a conflict in your understanding of your faith, then ignore what I'm saying. Take what's helpful, leave what's not. But I'll present a claim about the emotional life that I think can be integrated into an Islamic tradition. Emotions are natural tools with specific functions. That means all emotions are healthy. Emotions themselves need to be guided by reason, though, and that emotions, when guided by reason, can lead us to making moral choices. So the emotions themselves, such as happiness, joy, desire, fear, anger, sadness, are not intrinsically morally good or morally evil. But what we do, how we act in response to these emotions, is when our behavior takes on a moral quality as good or evil. Emotions are accompanied by physiological changes. That means the body feels physical things happening. When you're angry, you might feel tension in your fists and your heart might race. When you're sad, you may feel a swelling in the eyes and tears falling down your face. When you're excited and you desire something, you may feel physiological arousal through sexual excitement in the groin. So the physiological changes must be acknowledged, but do not need to be acted upon. All emotions must be allowed to grow and integrated with and subordinated to reason and the will. Emotions, therefore, must be cultured, educated, and refined so that they can be guided by the will and informed by reason. Reason meaning our higher faculty of our intellect, and reason is informed by our conscience. And in most religious traditions, there is a belief in a conscience, a part of the human mind that is cultivated and guided by our religious traditions and by natural law to help us tell right from wrong. And every emotion, this is the most important part of this, that's why it's the end of the flowchart here, does not need to be expressed or gratified. It does need to be felt. So a great example from the man who most succinctly offered these ideas in the name of Dr. Conrad Bars, who is a Catholic psychiatrist. He highlights that when we deny, suppress, or hide our emotional responses to good and evil, or to sense goods and sense evils, this will decrease our ability to seek the good and decrease our ability to flee from evil. His distinct concept to be exemplified is he was a survivor of the Holocaust. So he was for 2 years kept imprisoned in a Nazi prison camp. In that prison camp, he said he was angry every day at the injustice of the situation he was in. However, he was not permitted to express verbally or even show in his actions or his facial expressions the anger he felt. But neither, he said, did he repress it or deny it or hide it. And his quote is, "I could never display my anger in any form, neither did I repress it. It was constantly directed by my reason, which told me that to become outwardly angry at my captors would mean certain death. Prayer and anger allowed me to see the hour of liberation by General Patton and his Third Army. 994 of the 1,000 young Frenchmen in my transport from France to Buchenwald died, many of them as a result of their apathy and their lost will to live." So he claimed that his anger, while he felt it, allowed him to have the energy to not want his captors to have the pleasure of seeing him die. Now that sounds extreme, but my point in bringing this up is you can feel your emotions, observe their reactions in your body, including their associated physiological changes, reflect on the source of the emotional trigger, and integrate your response with your conscience without having to act in a way that is contrary to your religious belief. How does that apply to same-sex attraction? That means it is possible to feel an attraction, notice its response in your body, reflect with curiosity about the origin and the cause of this attraction, and then make a reasoned choice supported by your religious views, guided by your will, towards something that works for you and your conscience. You are not repressed by not acting on your sexual impulses. You could cause obsessive compulsive repressive issues if you flee from your feelings through hiding, repressing, or denying the presence of an emotional response instead of integrating it into yourself and into your conscience and guiding it with your intellect, and instead guiding it with fear. So we're going to move to the next slide. I'm spending more of the presentation on emotional integration today because I think that will benefit you more than focusing solely on OCD. But as I mentioned, emotional repression can contribute to obsessive compulsive responses. So this theory of emotional integration is very central to my view that many men with OCD and SSA need help with emotional integration in order to treat their obsessive compulsive disorder. Moving on to the next slide. Briefly, with spirituality and religion in therapy, you should consider the possibility that the therapist and you can work together to utilize your religious worldview to reinforce positive treatment goals. This can include integrating wisdom from a spiritual mentor. It could be especially helpful if you have religious-focused OCD to have a local person like an imam that you trust or somebody, a spiritual leader you trust, that can help challenge your irrational fear and your religious scrupulosity. Lastly, we want to emphasize the connection to your understanding of a relational God. So all religion seeks to unify man and his relationship to the Creator. That means it is intrinsically relational. And most people with obsessive compulsive scrupulous fears or religious focused OCD, and by the way, like I mentioned, if you've come to therapy for unwanted SSA and you have OCD, it is most likely that your OCD is focused on religion, at least part of it. So if that's the case, emphasizing in your connection with your spirituality and your religious worldview the relational aspects of your religion is going to be important as opposed to strictly the rules of your religion. Rules can become rigid and fixated in ways that undermine their purpose in terms of following religious big picture ideals. And relational oriented approaches to religion can help utilize the emotional integration necessity that I mentioned before in the healing of wounds related to same-sex attraction. So for the last few minutes, I'm going to do a very rushed version of some of what relates to people's being susceptible to OCD and SSA. So attachment theory, for those of you familiar with the work of Dr. Joseph Nicolosi, he did extensive work trying to make the argument that people men with an insecure attachment in childhood are more likely to develop same-sex attraction, that attachment loss preceded the development of same-sex erotic arousal. Attachment means, in theory, that a child, in order to develop psychologically, needs to maintain a sense of secure attachment with their primary attachment figures, ideally a biological mother and father. And this means that they can voice their needs and have reasonable assumption that their primary caregivers will strive to meet those emotional, physical, and psychological needs in response. Although there are no perfect attachment figures, there is the possibility in this theory that there is good enough attachment to provide secure attachment. And when you don't have that, you may develop an insecure attachment, which can lead towards either an anxious, an avoidant, or a fearful attachment, all three of which are forms of insecure attachments. People with insecure attachments are more likely to develop subsequent psychopathology, according to attachment theory. This can include same-sex attraction, and recent research shows that if you have insecure attachment, it is more likely that you are going to have a susceptibility to OCD as well. So why is this important? Correlation and causal evidence exists between insecure attachment style and vulnerability to developing same-sex attraction. Correlational and possible causation exists between insecure attachment and vulnerability to OCD. Men with SSA have statistically higher rates of OCD. So if co-occurring and OCD and SSA emerges, various factors should be considered regarding the distinctiveness and the etiology and the treatment. So I'm going to skip some of the research-based evidence here because of time, but I want you to know that there is really good research emerging that shows both men with SSA have higher levels of OCD, but also that people with OCD and SSA are insecurely attached and thus need relationally based treatments and therapy that focus on emotion integration as well as exposure with response prevention, which is the traditional CBT model for dealing with OCD. Why is it important that OCD, when people have SSA, might be distinct? It's important because some people have made the argument in the past that there is no difference among people with different symptom dimensions of OCD. Basically, everyone who has OCD, they argued, is the same. It's all the same. It should be treated the same. But research is showing more and more that differing symptom emphasis and severity in OCD is actually worth looking at. So a recent study in 2021 by, I'm terrible with this name, Pinciotti, and I can't even say the name, or Coot, I apologize, I'm terrible with these names, found that sexual minorities, that means people who they identified as LGBT, compared with heterosexuals, reported significantly greater obsessive compulsive thoughts related to violence, sex, and religion. That symptom dimension was significantly higher in sexual minorities that they studied, and significantly, they had much lower rates of contamination OCD. So like I said, if you have religious focused OCD, that is an indicator that you likely also have sexual focused OCD, because those symptom dimensions come together most of the time. And if you're a man with SSA, you're more likely to have the religious sexual focus of OCD than if you didn't. Unique parts of the brain are activated in brain scans by people in these symptom dimensions related to sexual, religion, and violence fears. And additionally, OCD, based on research among concordant groups of twins, identical twins, a multivariate twin study of obsessive compulsive symptom dimensions concluded that OCD is not likely to be an etiological homogeneous condition. This means that basically the development of OCD can be different based on the type of fear you have. So evidence, therefore, is pointing towards possible reciprocal causality. And this is just a theory, so I'm not telling you this is causal evidence exists. I'm saying evidence is pointing towards that. And what this means, I'm going to go to the next slide. I know I'm doing this kind of quickly, so thank you for your patience. You can ask questions at the end about this. Chicken or the egg or both? In other words, what does reciprocal causality mean? Why does it exist? Why could it exist? If you have OCD and SSA, they may be factors that influence each other and kind of form a feedback loop, making each of them worse. Different theories exist in this regard, but one theory includes that OCD emerges first as a result of insecure attachment and other factors. Resulting anxiety that comes from that leads to having negative impact on sexuality and thus contributes to the emergence of same-sex attraction. A second theory includes same-sex feelings and behaviors emerge first in early adolescence, as a result of a variety of the factors we discussed, which then contributes to excessive fear about sexuality, because the first emergent feelings of sexuality, if they're same-sex focused, and if you're a religious person, that's going to bring up fear, which might create a further obsessive compulsive neuroses about sex. So I argue that it could be that both are true, both and more, that these developing issues with possible common underlying development factors contributing to vulnerability, such as insecure attachment, genetic predisposition, etc., can stack upon one another and create this feedback loop that is part of the reason we're seeing such a high concordance of same-sex attraction and obsessive compulsive disorder. We're almost done, guys, and then we'll go to questions. So OCD generally is known to focus on areas of the self that are important to identity. And this is through research found going back 30 years. And so if an important area of self-identity for a religious individual is their sexuality, because their religion has very strict teachings about sexuality, it can become a higher chance that that is an area that OCD will focus. It's not because you're religious, in other words, that you're OCD. It's that you have OCD and religion's important to you and sexuality is important to you. So your OCD part of your brain fixates on the part of the self that is important. So this is good to consider, because some people might say, well, your religion is just causing you to be OC, obsessive compulsive. And research actually points to alternative views that because you're religious, that's why your obsessive compulsive disorder is focused on religion and sexuality, not you're obsessive compulsive because you're religious. Fear and disgust, both as different emotional domains, are showing in emerging research to contribute to religious and sexual dimensions of OCD. And this is really important because some people say, well, I'm not afraid of sexuality, but moral disgust, including self-directed moral disgust and other directed moral disgust, can contribute to obsessive compulsive symptoms, which can lead to religious obsessive compulsive avoidance of both heterosexual strivings. So for many of you men, there is often and one of the most interesting parts of this research that I want to highlight is a heightened moral disgust sensitivity related to religious obsessions that makes men with same-sex attraction irrationally more religiously afraid or disgusted of heterosexual sin than they are of homosexual behavior. So if you're a man who has co-occurring same-sex attraction and OCD, the obsessive compulsive disorder, if it's untreated, may be minimizing your ability to access your heterosexual potential and may be exacerbating your compulsive homosexual behavior. Self-disgust plays a role in shaping behavior and decisions in those with OCD. And every one of these points on this slide up here, I'm taking from evidence found in different studies, and you see the reference numbers there. After my presentation, since I don't have time to go through all of the articles I'm referring to, I'm happy to send a list of these references. I've taken ideas from these studies and used them as evidence for my theory here, but again, there are different ways of interpreting evidence that I'm presenting. So when you have this emerging research showing that there is a distinctive quality in how the brain responds in the development of OCD when it's co-occurring with SSA, it's important to try to understand that better. And so I want to use this presentation as an encouragement to you who are interested in this field or in understanding yourselves that it is worthwhile to spend time exploring why these possible reciprocal causality situations are worth looking into further. The last thing I'll focus on, and then we're going to wrap up, is emotional development factors such as insecure attachment styles may reduce the effectiveness of traditional CBT treatment for OCD, and thus an emotionally integrated model of treatment, like I've mentioned with emotional integration, attachment focus between client and therapist, can be useful. Clients with a lack of access to emotional affect, possibly because of excessive fear and anxiety related to OCD, may not respond well to addressing underlying trauma and attachment issues, which could be contributing to same-sex attraction and OCD without first reducing anxiety. And one of the ways we reduce anxiety without using CBT or with using CBT integrated with attachment models is through relational emotion-focused therapy. These types of therapies can include reintegrative therapy, which focuses on emotional awareness in the body, what traditionally Dr. Nicolosi Sr. called body work, as well as a list of other types of treatment. I'm going to skip the next slide, go down. So there are different, I'm going to skip these. These are different treatment goals and ways of outlining this possibility, but research outside of myself has shown some attachment and cognitive behavioral-based therapy integrated approaches for people who have both OCD and attachment insecurity, which would include people with SSA, can include things like contemporary psychodynamic therapy, mindfulness-based cognitive behavioral therapy, and affect-focused therapy, like I mentioned with Dr. Nicolosi's reintegrative therapy, which includes that. It's mindfulness-based CBT and affect-focused therapy, schema-informed cognitive behavioral therapy, and affirmation and mortification therapy from Dr. Bars. Last, additional interventions for OCD and same-sex attraction issues often include medication, evaluation from psychiatrists, nutrition, lifestyle changes, physical activity, group social support, religious organizations, family support, and alternative medical interventions such as TMS, as though it's called neurofeedback. So all of these other factors should be continuously assessed by your mental health professional if you're in therapy, so that you know that you're not having a blind spot to an important area of treatment intervention or possible other diagnosable mental health issue that you should consider. What is my main takeaway? In conclusion, if you have OCD and same-sex attraction, both must be addressed in order to help effectively address your underlying issues contributing to your SSA. Further, if you have both co-occurring SSA and OCD, it says something about the type of OCD you have and the type of treatments that will help. And namely, I'm arguing that emotion-focused therapy with an attachment lens with your therapist and any additional cognitive behavioral therapies, which are traditionally used for OCD, should be considered given the distinctiveness of same-sex attraction and OCD when they co-occur. And lastly, there is hope. If you have these issues or additional issues beyond just OCD and SSA, there is hope. And a lot of these treatments are found to be effective in reducing distress of OCD, as well as for many men, reducing same-sex attractions and or reducing their ability or increasing their ability to act in accordance with their conscience, to help with the emotional integration that I described, which helps men make moral choices that are in line and integrated with their conscience. Even if their feelings don't change, their behavior can become integrated with their emotions. Okay, we'll end there. Questions?
Thank you so much, Michael. Wow, yeah, so a lot, I'm sure a lot to take in for the audience, in terms of the insight of when same-sex attraction co-occurs with obsessive compulsive disorder, and as you mentioned, religion being a double-edged sword in terms of it helping your guiding your emotions through emotional integration, but also perhaps a catalyst for self-disgust, in terms of having a very judgmental view on ourselves, on what, for example, language like what we should be doing, for example, or how we should be. Just something that's I've seen, and I want to see if you reflect upon what you've presented, is if you see a population of clients which perhaps have OCD in getting help. So the recovery from the SSA becomes almost, it becomes almost an obsessive trait, if you like.
Say that last part. Is that a question, or are you just making a comment about that?
No, it's just a question to if you have experienced clients which will basically do everything possible under the sun to get rid of the same-sex attraction as quickly as possible.
Yeah, that can be a compulsion. And it's important to keep in mind that the emotional life, while motivation for change is important in terms of helping people make changes in their behavior or heal their emotions, it can become a source of compulsion, especially when you're attached to an outcome. Emotional integration requires acceptance of all feelings, even ones that we wish we didn't have at times. And so it's really important to, I like the phrase, surrender the outcome, not your effort. And so whenever someone has acceptance of surrendering the outcome, that can be tied back to religious faith, meaning there's a principle that I think I've heard outlined by Muslim clients, which is, if it be God's will. Is that right, Ali? Is that kind of a principle?
Yeah, like we say, inshallah, if God wills, yeah.
Right. And so that implies acceptance to surrendering to a will greater than your own. But you can only really do that if you believe that the Creator wills ultimately your good, that it is a good Creator. It doesn't mean we understand suffering in this life perfectly, but it does mean that you can, based on that phrase alone that you shared, you can accept a will greater than your own. And that acceptance will help reduce compulsivity because it does not require you to surrender your effort. For instance, I'm going to work as hard as I can to be as happy and healthy as it is possible for me to be. And any residual discomfort or stress or difficulty I have, I will surrender to my belief that God's will be done. I'm being cautious because I don't want to say words that I can't pronounce well and cause offense. anybody.
No, you pronounce everything correctly. And it's a beautiful concept of surrender as surrendering to the will of God, as you've mentioned. So we can start the Q&A. As you can see, a lot of you have been writing on the Q&A. You can like the questions which have been there, so they move up if you like, in a sense. So I'm just going to go through. If someone wants to speak as well, you can raise your hand now for that if there's a question. Yes, I think there's one question by Brother Ahmed. Brother Ahmed, would you like to start? Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Yes.
What would you like to ask?
Okay. If one's root cause of SSA is over attachment with the feminine or detachment with the masculine, what certain types of activities that he should do to develop a stronger inner sense of masculinity? That's all my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Could I answer that, or do you want to answer that first, Ali?
You go, yes.
Okay, so that question presupposes a belief. They said, if my SSA is as a result of detachment from the masculine and over-attachment with the feminine, so that's a good if to keep in there, meaning there are a variety of theories as to why, like I mentioned, the list of factors that contribute to the development of SSA. In my opinion, if you have an over-attachment to the feminine and an under-attachment with the masculine realm, you don't necessarily have to change activities, but self-perception is important. So how do I view myself in relationship to the masculine world? Practically speaking, if there are some activities that men who don't struggle with this in your life are interested in, that you can find enough genuine interest in to experiment or explore with them together. For instance, if there's some kind of local sport or some kind of local social gathering that you've traditionally avoided, then it's worth trying to go out of your comfort zone into the, quote, world of men and try exploring what may feel good to you. But my caution is, in OCD, many men have a fear of feeling good, feeling pleasure, including sexual pleasure. And they have a fear because their sexual pleasure first came towards men, many of them. So then they begin to fear pleasure altogether. All pleasure must be bad because my initial feelings of pleasure came towards men. And that's a very harmful fear. And so my caution about pursuing activities that are masculine at face value is that if you just muster enough energy up to force yourself to do activities like I'm going to play soccer or football because I have to in order to be a man, it might be dismissive of the inner moving of your desires that God gave you, of what you enjoy and what you like. So always start there, in my opinion. What do I enjoy thoroughly? What feels really good to me? And then can I bring that thing that I really love and feels good to me into the realm of the masculine? How can I take it away from my detachment from the masculine and attach it to the masculine? Is there a if I like ballet, for instance, somebody might say, well, that's not culturally masculine. Okay, is there a group of guys that you know that also like it, that are heterosexual? Could you go together with them to the ballet? So finding ways to bring your desires, your interests into the realm of the masculine. And then, of course, like I said earlier, maybe challenging yourself to see where you've, out of fear, avoided things that are traditionally masculine, and that there are safe men who you like, who you can ask to help initiate you into maybe some of their activities and test to see what you enjoy in that regard.
Thank you. I think that was put well in terms of attachments and how to find activities which would help with rebuilding that attachment. We'll go for question. We've got question here. What can be done for people who don't have access to therapy because of lack of experts locally or have financial issues to get therapy from foreign countries? Any suggestions?
Yes, that's a great question. And there's no easy answer. There are a lot of, first of all, most obviously, you're on a support chat webinar. So these kinds of things are invaluable. I think much of the 50 years ago, much of the human population that struggled with same-sex attraction would just have given anything to have this kind of online support because of the complete fear of discussing these issues publicly in the past. So let's not diminish that. You have a community of people here who clearly are willing to participate and support each other. So online communities, including things like there are Discord channels. I'm sure Ali has access to other groups like that, Facebook groups. Also, don't hesitate to explore YouTube for some residual resources that exist there. There are a lot of talks on YouTube that offer a lot of really great insight about the treatment of same-sex attraction. And then books, similarly, there are bibliotherapy options. So for instance, Dr. Van den Aardwijk wrote The Battle for Normality, which he's a leading Dutch psychiatrist on these matters. And a lot of people in our field know his research. And The Battle for Normality is a cheap and short self-help book. It's literally designed for self-therapy to give you feedback on things to try and things to consider. And then there are other groups that are not therapy, but are peer-led experiential groups. I know that people here know about Brothers Road, which is an example of an organization that provides international weekend retreats to support men dealing with same-sex attraction, like the Journey in Manhood weekend. So all of these things can be enormously helpful if you don't have access to professional therapy, because as I mentioned in the beginning, therapy is professionally guided self-change. So don't underestimate yourself and your change process, even if you don't have access to professional therapy, which I'm a huge advocate for professional therapy. That's my job as a professional therapist. I, of course, value the work that we do in our field, but it's not exhaustive. You can do so much on your own, especially looking for other men that you can connect with in your own circle. Dare to trust men in your personal local town, community, wherever you live. Of course, base it on your knowledge of the laws and of the actual physical safety you have in sharing this with anybody. But if you deem that you're physically safe and psychologically safe to share it, but you're just afraid to share with a local man who doesn't deal with this issue, take time, but over time, dare yourself to stretch into sharing with other men, because that is an enormous support for many people who deal with this issue.
Really quite comprehensive. Thank you. Next question is slightly personal. Where are you with your own attractions, Michael? I'd be interested to know what change means for you.
Is that from an anonymous person?
It's anonymous.
Bold question from an anonymous source.
Yes.
So I'll say this. Change for me has meant, most importantly, that I find a way to try, like I mentioned, to be as healthy and healed as it is possible for me to be emotionally and spiritually. If that results in changes and shifts in my sexual feelings, that's a bonus in a lot of ways. And in my behavior, I would like to be able to have the freedom to be married one day or to be single based on my choice, not out of avoidance of marriage due to fear or avoidance of singlehood due to fear. So reducing fear has been a huge part of my healing journey, both through reducing obsessive compulsive fear and also reducing shame and fear based on other people's perceptions of me, In my own experience, that has led to some significant shifts in my personal feelings, but more than that, my shift in focus has been predominantly on how am I integrating my emotions into my conscience, and how am I integrating my conscience into the way I have a relationship with God and relationship to other men and women.
Thank you. That's beautiful. And similarly, if I look at what I had, my understanding of change very earlier on was, okay, going to get the world's best therapy. I'm not going to feel these emotions anymore, and a lot of clients come in, the first session will come in with that. And you almost need that you need that positivity, a level of positivity to get you going. And
Yeah.
I think for most of us who've been in this journey, there's probably, a plateau, which you will probably reach once after, you've tried all the methods and your attraction's still there. It's a lot lesser than what it was. At least I can speak from my experience. I was like, okay, I've hit a plateau. And I think the work of surrender at that time is really important. That maybe, and I see this for most of the cases, that maybe the change is at a really good level, but we're not really appreciating that. So a lot of the times I would think, oh, if I find this man attractive, I must still have the SSA. But what I find is other men also find that man attractive. So when I see things through my lens, it can seem a lot more, harsher than when I'm seeing through other people's lens. I think it's important that changes, like with anything in psychotherapy. If you went for depression, we had Caroline before, we said if you went for depression, you went for anxiety, you don't expect that depression or anxiety to completely disappear, but that you would, as Michael said, integrate it emotionally, that you've integrated your faith and your emotions in a healthy way, as much as you can, and not, and I think it's really important that people understand what change means and what change means throughout that process, and how that word change differs as you go through the process. So thank you for that.
One other thing I'll say to add to that too is my personal change story that this person asked about. I'm not trying to dodge the question about being more specific. It's not something that I think is helpful to go into all that expansive history. But I think that especially for people with this issue, whether or not your feelings change, the journey of trying to live according to your conscience is worth it, because it's based in truth, and truth is worth it, because that helps us pursue the happiest life possible, is to pursue the life that is ordained by us for us by God. So it doesn't mean that I think you should approach it in a rigid or miserable way, which is why I think OCD is not helpful, because it diminishes the relational perspective of God, who is a loving creator. But no matter how many times you get up or fall, getting up is the journey, and keeping going is worth it. And that's what I think is my most important view of the change process, is that no matter what, just being on the journey is worth it, because it is the truth.
Thank you for that. We have a next question. Have you observed a sizable portion of the SSA population meets the criteria for ADHD and perhaps autism?
I have not observed this personally, in the sense that I don't regularly assess clients for autism spectrum, or well, we started to at our clinic. ADHD we don't focus on as much. It's not a presenting symptom that people come in with, so it doesn't mean it's not there. It's just people don't often present to us as saying, like, this is the thing I'm dealing with. I can't sit still, I can't pay attention, I lose focus. So, but I know that other people have found that to be, and Faras, your friend Ali that was at IFTCC with us, he's done more research on specifically the role in terms of ADHD and SSA, and found that there are people out of Egypt that have also explored this a lot about the role of ADHD. So I think there is emerging research in that regard, but that's just not an area of focus of mine. So it doesn't mean that it's not real, it's just not my focus.
Yeah, no, I think Sheikh Fadil has done some research on ADHD, definitely, yes. If one's root cause of SSA is over attachment with the feminine, detachment with the masculine, what certain types of I think this one's probably been answered, isn't it? It's probably
Yeah,
the
that's the
same
same
question. Yeah, same question in the other one. If I get enough healthy touch, hugs, holding from a masculine man, will this help me in my healing?
It's a great question. You know, different people in this field have very different views on this particular question. There's a lot of controversy around this. You know, do I need healthy touch? Do I not? Well, I think let's start with your culture. So where do you live and what is your culture? And what is normal among men in that community anyway? Sadly, in the United States, for instance, we have abysmal levels of touch between heterosexual men. In fact, there are a lot of Muslim men and other cultures that exemplify male touch much more frequently and more intimately in healthy ways, in my opinion, than American men often do. And I would say even like when I say American, I'm looking at predominantly Muslim countries versus an American culture where Muslim men in the United States are heavily influenced by the Western American culture in that regard. I don't notice them, for instance, like walking, holding hands, etc., where I know there are some countries where that might be common. So that'd be the first thing, is just think about like what's normal in your area for men. Are you getting less than that? And most men with SSA actually avoid even normal levels among their own culture of heterosexual male touch because of fear of being perceived as gay. So that is the first place to start in terms of, instead of adding on like a list of extra holding you need, start with how am I relating to the men in a way comparable to the other men in my community. And then two, yeah, I think it's really important generally for men to feel safe touch from other men. If you are in a part of an organization like Brothers Road, who does Journey to Manhood Weekend, they facilitate some of that through their weekend. If you're not, there are ways, and exploring that is something you should be cautious about. But start with, like I said, simple things. Like you said, hugs, holding hands. The thing is, you can hold somebody psychologically without holding them physically. So you can provide emotional holding even without touching someone. But if you can do both, that can, especially for men who have had sexual trauma or men who have been severely deprived of touch from other healthy males, be a really important part of their healing journey. So some of it's personal to each individual. Ali, what are your thoughts on that? I'd like to know, since you know the communities better than I do.
I think from what I've read, touch is, it's a primal need. So there's been studies of babies, for example, who've had touch and who haven't had touch. A lot of clients that we say, okay, remember a time, can you remember a time when your father was hugging you, for example, if they're male, and they don't have that sense. And I think, yes, our cultures are quite, in Pakistan, you will see people holding hands, men holding hands, and they're walking, and it's not considered like they're in a relationship, for example. So I think we do have probably a, would I say, mature understanding of touch in that sense between the same sex. So I think for some people, it can be at an emotional level, but for a lot of people, which I see, when it's at a physical level, and it's because it's to do with the body, maybe to do with the body shame, that, you know, like I feel essentially different from someone else. And then if they touch me, then that touch is getting me some sense of belonging, or maybe affirmation in that sense. So, but yeah, it's quite relative to the history, I would say, of the client and how they perceive that. But I know in therapy, touch is a no. So,
Yeah, this is not,
yeah.
I'm not referring to psychotherapy. We're talking about relationships outside of therapy.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's not mentioned. What I meant to say was it's not mentioned in therapeutic communities as much because of that. But if we were to take it as a relationship level, I'm quite a proponent for hugs, you know, and like showing getting that healthy touch from your peers.
Yeah, and to reiterate too, the neurobiology piece, there are different theories, but the polyvagal theory, among other theories, talk a lot about returning the brain to a safety state, a safety social state. And when you hug somebody for 10, 15 seconds, it will reduce stress levels, reduce cortisol levels, increase the hormone oxytocin. I mean, I wish people in the United States were more open to long hugs and holding hands. And so it's a real difficulty for me personally that that's not the case. And I work hard in my life to try to overcome that in different ways. So I'm just not even telling clients personally what to do, but I think it is essential to have human contact. And we live in a very isolated and fragmented society. So even if you didn't have same-sex attraction, I would make a similar claim that finding ways to have healthy physical intimacy with other adult humans, or if you're like a family member and you have kids, you know, kids and parents, they can provide that for each other. Holding a child on your lap, I mean, any kind of healthy touch between individuals and families or communities, it's important. And so, like, let's broaden the conversation beyond just like a man with SSA needs hugs. No, a man needs hugs, or a man needs touch, because that's human and that's different than just being around people as though you're wrapped in a bubble all the time. So I really don't want to pathologize the need for touch as though it's just because we have a deficit that we need this. It's really just human to need and want physical connection with other people.
Absolutely, no. I think that puts it quite well. We've got someone who's asking, how can I find happiness? I struggle with bisexual feelings and OCD. It's in my head the whole day. What can I do?
Yeah, well, some of what we've talked about is the different types of support already outside of therapy. But in this case, if you know you have bisexual issues and OCD and it's in your head all day, that indicates a pretty severe level of obsession. And I would say the first step would be go to see a medical doctor, because medical doctors can provide interventions at the beginning. Often medication evaluations involve looking for treatments like selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which I'm not a psychiatrist, but these medications are prescribed by general practitioners and psychiatrists to help reduce obsessive compulsive disorder. Medication is a known treatment for OCD. With that in mind, if a medical doctor and you work together, find a therapist, therapy can, like I said, help guide people through the change process. But obsessive compulsive disorder should probably be looked at first before you focus on just the sexuality issues. There are even online self-help resources for OCD. One workbook that Dr. Nicolosi's clinic uses regularly is called the Mindfulness Workbook for OCD. And it comes from a big private practice in Los Angeles called the Obsessive Compulsive Disorder Center in Los Angeles. It's available on Amazon, and it is a self-help workbook. So the organization that published it designed it to be utilized at home by individuals trying to help themselves deal with their OCD. And at the end of the workbook, they note, look, if you're still struggling with this to an extent that you're not able to gain sufficient improvement on your own, then seek therapy. So the point being, you don't have to wait till you get to therapy to start helping yourself, even with the OCD part of these issues. And medication evaluations, by the way, are important because sometimes there can be other factors that a doctor will notice that are contributing to OCD that a therapist can't assess for. But also, if you can't afford therapy and you go to a doctor, they deem you have OCD, they diagnose you, and they prescribe medication, medication is often very affordable for OCD specifically. And so that could be a treatment option to consider if you don't have access to other resources, if the doctor prescribes it and you're eligible.
Well, that's really useful. A lot of sometimes the conditions are not psychological, sometimes they're physiological. So it's very important to cut that out before you go straight in. So thank you for that. I'm checking on time. How are we like for questions? Because I know you're on a tight schedule.
Yeah, I have about 5 to 7 more minutes. If you want to keep answering questions, I can.
Okay. Why or do you believe there are many comorbid conditions associated with SSA, more precisely OCD, BPD, bipolar disorder? Or do you think the theory about the genes that cause SSA are also the same as anxiety disorder genes?
That's a great question. So part of that I can answer very easily. I don't know. So that part about the genes and which overlapping, I mean, I know that the human genome study that was released, I forget the name of the authors on it, but I've seen extensive presentations on it, found that they estimated 33% genetic predisposition towards the development of same-sex erotic arousal, but that was made up of a bunch of separate individual amounts of percentages towards other things that were not actually sex related, like likelihood to take risks, for example, openness to new experiences, I believe was one. So as far as what percentage of those genes overlap, let's say with the same genes that provide genetic predisposition for OCD, I don't know. And that's a great question. It seems though that the people who are adults with same-sex attraction, they're more likely to have a variety of these issues. Sexual issues emerge in adolescence, and the groundwork for a lot more, for the most part, emerge in adolescence, but the groundwork for personality development and subsequent mental disorders is often, in most psychological developmental theories, well established by age 7, 8, 9 years old. So I do think that the personality structure of an individual based on their environment predisposes them to a variety of issues, SSA being one of them, and that being more like a symptom of more serious underlying personality characteristics that are the reason why these people have other issues too. And when also, if you act on a lifestyle, if you throw yourself headlong into an unhealthy lifestyle, it can exacerbate whatever mental health issues you had to begin with. And homosexual lifestyles are not healthy. And so, insofar as the way that they're enacted. So that could also be contributing to the further development of these issues for those individuals. I'm sorry, I'm rambling a little bit, but that's the best I got. That's a hard question. I'll get back to you.
It is a hard question. I agree. I agree with you on that one. Before I go to another question, is there anyone in the audience who wants to speak? Raise their hands. Giving you the opportunity now. If there is someone who does want to speak by audio, if not,
quick answer a couple of these and like do bullet points real quick for them.
Yeah. Do you want to?
Okay, I'm looking at the questions here, and I just want to throw a couple things out there.
Go ahead.
Do you feel psychoanalysis or psychodynamic treatment exacerbate OCD symptoms because they are motivated by unjustified and irrational fear and anxiety? So traditionally, people would say that psychodynamic therapy can be less helpful for OCD issues because it can cause people to seek certainty about their obsessions if they're just talking about it all the time and not actually addressing the underlying emotional issues or habituating to the fear as CBT does. But as I mentioned in my presentation, there's not a one-size-fits-all approach in terms of the development of OCD. And so the treatment of OCD should be at least nuanced in that regard. So psychodynamic focuses on childhood relationships. These things can help with attachment issues, which can help reduce OCD. So I think if you have a therapist that is at least aware that you have OCD and they're using psychodynamic treatment in a conjunction with possibly additional things like CBT, it would be better than somebody treating you with psychodynamic therapy and not aware that you have OCD, which could lead possibly to exacerbating the symptoms. I also see here, what usually occurs with gay identified individuals struggling with OCD and their anxiety disorders? Do they struggle less and differently those with unwanted SSA? I don't know, because I don't have a lot of experience with gay identified individuals and OCD, although I have a couple, not enough to give like a real clinical picture there. That's my quick answer to that. Does a willpower affect the cure for SSA? If so, how big does it influence the changing of the cure of SSA? If my willpower is low, whereas I want to be cured, then what can I do? So this is a great question. So what is willpower? How do we strengthen it? And emotional integration that I mentioned offers some insight about willpower, meaning our feelings, our emotions actually strengthen our will, because when they're integrated with our intellect, the intellect in the tradition of St. Thomas Aquinas in the Catholic school of thought, but also in psychoanalysis in many ways, when the intellect and the emotional life work together and the intellect guides the emotional life, it strengthens the will. When fear guides the emotional life, so one emotion is guiding the other emotions, it actually lowers willpower and the intellect is being dismissed, and then an emotional repression occurs. In terms of when you do begin to integrate the emotions with your intellect and live in concordance with your conscience, strengthening willpower is possible too. And this can be through traditional religious practices. So for instance, asceticism, fasting, you guys are coming up on Ramadan. Fasting is a way of strengthening willpower. So a lot of built-in religious traditions actually do support strengthening of the will, but they really only work to their best and highest level when there is an emotional integration along with the religious tradition and behavior that's occurring. So look up, there's other great research on strengthening willpower, but it should not be through what in traditional like addiction models is called white knuckling it, through avoidance of the emotional life and through repression, through fear, as opposed to what I've described before. I'm going to answer two more real quickly. To what extent do we SSA golfers help each other? How is same deficit tire each other? Okay, sorry, I'm going to try to read that slowly. Your body gestures are manly, Michael. That's a, first of all, thank you. I'm not sure my middle school bullies would agree with you, but so my body gestures are manly. Is it natural or did I develop it? I would say it is developed, and not necessarily through forced, intense change of my way of being, but over time, as I have tried to relate to men in ways that felt natural, but also challenged me to integrate into the community of men, my body reactions grew with it. People with whom we identify strongly influence our way of behaving. So if I begin to identify more strongly with communities of men that are masculine, that will reflect in my own mirroring of them. But my masculine gestures in here aren't rigid. When I'm with friends who are also creatives like I am and maybe are silly, I can be silly and goofy and I can and act in gestures that are flexible, but I don't feel beholden to behaving or gesturing in ways that are solely in the realm of the feminine out of an avoidance of an identification with the masculine realm. All right, I'm going to keep going one or two more, Ali, if that's all right.
Sure.
Okay, aside from trauma, no, I already answered that one. If there are no such thing as OCD, these are all creations in mind. Okay, that's a great question. So there is no such thing as OCD. These are all creations of mind. If we have repetitive intrusive thoughts, these are the work of Satan. Just see a lot. So that is a fair religious perspective to take. If you want to believe that, that's fine. However, one thing to consider from other religious traditions is that there are three sources in, I'll give, for instance, a Catholic interpretation, and then you can decide whether or not this fits in Islam. There are three sources of temptation in the world: the fallen world, the fallen nature, and spiritual warfare. Satan would represent spiritual warfare, but that doesn't, in the Christian tradition, account for all sources of temptation. They can also come from the fallen self, so our fallen nature as humans, the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve, we have a fallen human nature, and the fallen world, thus creation is fallen and imperfect. And so that can come through environment, through biology, through all kinds of other factors. So this threefold thing could be helpful in some people's view of Islam, to consider that maybe intrusive thoughts are not all just the work of Satan. But if you have a sincerely viewed religious belief that that's the case, and OCD doesn't exist, that's okay as well.
It's the first verse that we started with was waswasa min shaitan, but the second verse that was the waswasa from your own self. So the Quran shows you that some thoughts are not from Satan, but they are from our own nafs, our own self. Yes, thank you.
Okay, all right, I'm going to stop answering bullet style because I tried to get through like 5 or 6. Any
No,
last?
you did really, really well on that. Yes. I don't want to keep you too long because I know you have a commitment after that. Yes. Is there any of these questions or any last words you would like to end on, or to convey, or to the people here?
Yeah, I see the top two say, do you feel SSA individuals are always in their heads? And then please let me know how I can get out of this hell of SSA. I want to be alive again. And then my OCD is not about religion, it's about sexuality. So I can kind of group those together. SSA, same-sex attraction, is sort of a flag that indicates somebody has underlying emotional and psychological developmental issues, in my opinion. In those cases, most of those men struggle with emotional integration and often have OCD. And so in that way, yes, in their heads, meaning cognitively focused and emotionally less affectively, emotionally in the body aware. Getting out of the hell of SSA, being alive again implies somebody lives in a lot of fear, which again, like I mentioned, OCD is often excessive and repressive fear and disgust. So getting help to feel all of your emotions, even feeling joy and enjoyment and pleasure, is really important to getting out of the hell of SSA and starting to live with your SSA and not be afraid of it all of the time. And OCD is heightened assessment of fear and disgust where there is not an equivalent level of threat. So helping people slow down, pay attention to the body, feel all of their emotions, face their fears so that they can reduce their fears, can be really helpful in getting out of their heads, into their hearts, and out of the hell of SSA, and more of looking at it as a journey of integrating their conscience and their emotions instead of feeling all or nothing. Either I have SSA and I'm miserable, or I have OSA and I'm perfect. Because let me tell you, go look around the guys that you know. If they have OSA and they're perfect and they have no problems, then write me. I'd love to hear about that. But most likely that's not the case. So even if you find healing for your same-sex attraction, doesn't mean life is perfect or easy. So instead of seeing it as a categorical shift, either I have SSA and I'm in hell, and I'm an OSA and I'm in heaven. We're humans, we have struggles, we have to work on our struggles and bring them to God to help us live the best we can. And if your OCD isn't about religion, it's not really important. Religion, sexuality, and violence are all part of the same symptom dimension for almost all obsessive compulsive treatment. So even if it's mostly about sexuality, that's fine. The same resources would be really useful for you, even if you're not a religious person. I'm sorry that I'm talking so fast, you guys, but I want to give as much as possible as I can in the time we have.
I guess
one more and then I'll have to go.
go on.
No, go ahead. Is there one I should answer that you think?
Well, I guess we've enjoyed, well, the audience has really enjoyed, and we've got loads of questions, and I apologize to the audience of this the time. We did try to have the Q&A more. So I guess an appropriate question here would be, is there a way to connect with yourself?
Yeah, actually, so one, if you could send in the chat my email, I'll just provide it. I can send it. This is my email address, just like my personal email address that you guys, any of you are welcome to email me. I have led group therapy for Muslim men in the past where we had between 6 and 10 men, and it's a curriculum I've designed specifically for Muslim men. So if you can't afford individual therapy, if there's a demand and an interest, I'm open to doing another group for Muslim men in the future. But generally speaking, you can contact me with questions, or if you have concerns or want to possibly seek therapy. If you live most countries around the world, I can provide telehealth too, or just point you to other resources. So feel free to email me directly if you have any questions in that regard.
So for those who may be joining or watching a recording, that's mgasparrotherapy@gmail.com. So that's m.gasparrotherapy, all one word, @gmail.com.
Yeah, and I'm on Psychology Today. So if you Google Michael Gasparro Psychology Today, you can contact me through there, or catholictherapist.com. So you can reach me those ways as well.
Well, I'd like to really thank Michael. And as you would have seen in this session, Michael knows the Muslim client population, you know, and you can see, as we discussed, as is discussed himself, that it's been a personal journey for him, as it's for all of us. It's not a destination, it's a journey, and we are understanding ourselves, and to really appreciate the work which goes behind closed doors. I know that you recently became licensed, and how difficult that is. And I think sometimes people don't appreciate the work which is done behind to find to provide the care for the clients, and to read the most latest information and see the data. And there's a lot of things, and especially as you would have seen with maybe Waheed Jensen's podcast, or Coffee with Kareem, or other podcasts that Michael continues to speak about his own story in a public manner. And you know, and with today's climate, that requires a lot of bravery and a lot of courage. And you know, so we thank Michael. We thank the Breakthrough Clinic, the reintegrative therapy. Hopefully, you know, it seems like you've got your videos back on a different platform. You're in a better, if anything, it probably gave you some good publicity, right? If anything. Yeah. So we continue to see that this message, as Michael has shared, is through humanity, or through even in the lens of Abrahamic faith, that we do have this common truth and common needs, as we were discussing touch, for example, that we share as humanity, as men and as women. And I'm so grateful that Michael was, we managed to fit in the times. I'm ending the day and he's starting his day at the moment, and we're able to do that. Anything you'd like to say, Michael, before
just thank you to you, Ali, and grateful to the men who stayed on this call. It's a long call, a lot of me talking. So just keep in mind that it's great to be able to laugh at ourselves too, and not take ourselves too seriously, which I'm very much guilty of as well. But the common cure to neurotic anxiety, the age-old cure, is to be able to also laugh at ourselves sometimes too. So I say that to leave with hopefulness that we can feel so serious and so intense, and it doesn't mean there isn't seriousness and intenseness about this, but we have brothers on this journey. You're not alone, and it's okay to laugh along the way and to do your best with what you've been given, and just have compassion for yourself, because I'm working on that in my own life, and I'm hoping that we can all work on that together, to be patient and kind towards ourselves as we would hope to be towards others, which is very hard for a lot of men in this journey. So I want to reiterate that and just keep you hoping that there is growth and healing that is possible.
Thank you. And as well, all our webinars that you see are recorded, so you can find them on Facebook and YouTube. And we will continue next month. We're discussing touch. So we have Time, Touch, and Talk by Richard Cohen, who would be joining us for our next webinar. So please do join for that. And thank you all for your contributions today, and God bless.
Yeah, and thank you for having me. I'm really honored to be here, and I'm so grateful for you and your support and kindness, Ali.
Thank you, Michael.